What's up, everyone? My name is Matt, aka the Survivor Guy. Welcome to another video. Today we are going to be attempting to create and try the card building challenge from Survivor.
For today's challenge, you will each have 150 wooden tiles. On my go, you will use those tiles to build a house of cards 10 feet tall.
Some iterations of this challenge just have you trying to build a tower to a certain height before everyone else around you, hoping it doesn't fall over. Whereas some iterations of this challenge kind of up the ante by having you try and balance your stack on a platform.
With one hand, you're going to steady a balancing board while simultaneously building a house of cards with the other hand.
Regardless of which iteration of the challenge you're working with, in order to win the challenge, you need to be able to build a giant tower of cards, right? And that's the most fundamental skill that you need to win this challenge. As for practicing this challenge at home, you may be thinking, well, that's easy. Everyone's got a deck of cards standing around. But if I were to go grab a deck of cards, you may notice that these look quite different from these.
On my go, you will use those tiles.
So if you're really going to practice to see if you're capable of winning this Survivor challenge, you need something more similar in size and shape to the cards that you are given on the show. I started looking around my apartment. I want to practice this challenge. I want to make sure I'm ready come the time that CBS finally puts me on the show. If I get to try this challenge, I want to win it. So I began looking around. I'm like, all right, I can't use a regular deck of cards because it's way harder than what we see on the show, and it's not really close at all to what we see on the show. So I was thinking, all right, what is a similar size and shape to this? I don't know the regulation size and shape of a card stack on Survivor. Surprisingly, going on Google and typing in size and shape of cards used to stack in stack challenge on Survivor doesn't really come up with any kind of results. But just looking at what we see here and looking around what I have in my apartment, the closest match that I think that I could find was this, the case for a Nintendo Switch game. Now obviously this is not a perfect match, probably does not have the same weight. The corners of the Survivor blocks look a bit more rounded, these are a bit sharper, and we also have this little indent here, which we don't see on the cards there. But for the purposes of practice, I think this is as close as we're going to get. So if you at home are also looking to practice this challenge, spend more money than you should on a giant stack of video games. No, you can probably go to your local Lowe's or Home Depot and just cut yourself blocks of wood, little blocks of wood. Those might even end up working a bit better than this. I am a teacher, so I don't really have the money to be spending on this YouTube channel right now. So I'm going to work with what I've got. Also, shout out my dad who said video games would never help me in life. Wrong. Now, it's worth noting here that when doing this challenge, you are given a limit on the amount of cards you can use, right? So we've seen in the past a lot of people try and start with building a wide base and then get narrow as they go up, and they run into the problem of, crap, I'm out of cards, I'm out of pieces, I can't build any higher, and they have to restart. Right? So obviously, if we're looking, kind of at the strategy of how we're going to build this before we try it, we want something that's going to be stable, but we also want something that uses a small number of pieces. Based on what I found online, you get 150 to 200 tiles. I do not have 150 to 200 video games. I am not rich, so we're going to have to make do with what I have. But basically what I'm going to try and do is see how high I can stack what I have without having it fall over. Alright, so here I am with my stacks of video games. Let's give it a shot. So first thing I want to do, since I'm on a rug, I'm going to try putting two on the ground, just make a flat surface. You want a pretty sound base, because if your base isn't sound and that wobbles, your whole tower's falling over. So now let's see if I can just get two like this, and then try and stack some on top of it to hold those in place. So, all right, this is immediately harder than I thought. I feel like if these were heavier, that would actually be helpful, because what I'm gonna need is kind of more downward force on these bottom ones so that they stand up perfectly straight. Because that's kind of the problem I'm having right now, is the ends of these cases are kind of rounded. So just getting them to stand on their own is a bit of a struggle. All right, I've got a stack. It's not very impressive, but it is progress. See, now I'm afraid to touch it because I feel like it's gonna fall over, but I wanna get the second one on here, make it a little bit more stable, which means I would have to slide that back a little bit and then put this on that side, and there it goes. Jesus Christ. Alright, we have a stack going. Think I figured out the key. I'm trying to rush through it way too fast. With something like this, we see it all the time. If you go too fast, you make a mistake, your hands are too shaky, it falls. You really need to go slow and steady on this one. You want to build something really tall, you got to be real precise, especially early on. So, I'm sure this will stay up as I attempt to add another stack to it. Disaster occurs. Matt, back to square one. His stack falls over. Thanks, Jeff. So, trying to stack the video games didn't exactly go as planned. They're the right size for practicing the challenge, but they're very light, and because they're very light, it's much easier for them to fall over. They also have a very smooth, plasticky surface. And from what we can see in the Survivor Challenge, those blocks look like they're made of wood. Wood is a much rougher surface. It has more friction between the blocks, so you won't have to deal with them kind of sliding, right? So what we could kind of see when I was trying to use the video games is, here's the one on the bottom, here's the one on the top. You put more weight on it, and it kind of slides like that, right? It's not perfectly balanced because there's such little friction between them. It's such a smooth surface, they start sliding all over the place. So, video games, despite the size matching pretty closely, are not going to work. What might work instead would be books. Now, books are not all the same size, so some of them may be close to what you see in Survivor, some of them may not, and the different sizes between them are probably going to throw this challenge off quite a bit, but they are much heavier than the video games were, and they are much rougher. The surface is much rougher than the video games were, which bodes a lot better for its stackability. Alright, so now I've got my pile of books. You may notice it's smaller than the pile of video games, don't judge me. So, we're going to try the same thing again, and see if maybe we can get a little more luck this time. Okay, much easier than the video games. I already have my first stack done. What I'm noticing is similar to that last one, you really have to go slow and find the balance point between everything, but having a heavier object and having more friction between the objects is certainly helping. So good news is, if I can do this here, I should have no problem with the cards that they give you on Survivor. Stack going, and back to square one. So what I've noticed is this seems a lot more stable than when I had two side by side like that. So it could be the extra weight is just not good with the books. But if this turns out to be stable, that could end up being good in the Survivor Challenge anyway, because again, you have a limited number of blocks. So if this ends up being more stable with the books, it's possible that when you're on Survivor and you have whatever cards they give you, this could be stable enough, and perhaps even more stable than the 2 method, so it might be beneficial to try this method, but as soon as I add another one. Alright, so the books didn't really work out either. Despite how it may have seemed, though, this was not a complete loss. We did learn a few things. First thing we learned, don't try and stack things that are not uniform and are not made to be stacked. The blocks that they use on Survivor are specifically made with the right weight and the right material so that they can be stacked. The things I was using here today, I tried to substitute. Obviously, video game containers are not meant to be stacked. Obviously, books are not meant to be stacked. And by trying to stack those things, we ran into a few problems. We did make some progress, though. And with that progress, we learned a few things. Like, first, don't try and rush it, right? Obviously, you're on a time limit when you're doing this challenge. You want to do it faster than everyone else. But what I found is when I got stressed out and I started trying to stack it really fast, that's when it kept falling more and more. It takes a very slow and steady hand to make minor adjustments to get everything to balance perfectly. Second thing we learned, so I started out with the idea of putting 2 vertically this way and then 2 flat on top so that the weight of those 2 would help keep the bottom 2 level. That was the idea going in. What I ended up finding out with the books is that it really didn't increase the steadiness of the stack that much. Not enough that it's worth using a block. Remember when we watched some of the survivors try this challenge, a lot of the times survivors would have something that was really steady, but they would run out of blocks and have to redo everything.
Ozzy with his last piece. Not going to do it. Ozzy going to have to tear down his stack and come up with a new strategy.
And that could be $1 million mistake. So I think going into a Survivor challenge, you have the 2 vertical stacks and 1 on top, and you try that. If it falls over a few times, it falls over a few times. Maybe you want to switch up your strategy, look around, see what the other survivors are doing. But I think as a good starting strategy, that should be steady enough, and it kind of ensures that you're not going to run out of blocks and have to redo everything at the end. So those are kind of the main takeaways that we can get from this. Other than the fact that I hope if I have to do this challenge, it's for reward and not immunity. Maybe eventually I start making more money, I can go out and buy something that might work better and try this again and see if I can actually get a decent stack going. But this wasn't a complete loss. Thank you guys for watching. Please check out some of my other videos if you like this. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe, growing the channel, might make it bigger and have a higher chance of someone at CBS noticing. And if you work at CBS, give me a call.